you, Michael. Wonderful partner from the East Ohio United Methodist Conference here in Ohio. And we welcome you and welcome others of you. Ivy, good to have you with us, and Gloria and Sean and all of you. A delight. And a special gift tonight. Each time we gather, we seek to have our hearts and our minds opened in new ways, our not just our awareness, but our call deepened and transformed around this important ongoing work. And I think Reverend Dr. Geoffrey Black probably needs no introduction, but I'm going to, Geoffrey, offer one. And I want to do this in the official and the unofficial way. The official way, of course, is that you served our beloved Church of the United Church of Christ as general minister and president, for which we are so very thankful. And before that, you were conference minister, and before that, you served in campus ministry and a whole host of other roles and arenas of ministry, many more than I could name. At a personal level, though, I want to say that in our opportunity to work together on the United Church Homes Board, you and I have now over the years had the wonderful gift of some conversation. And what I experience in you is such a depth of spirit and a generosity of spirit that I always come away feeling as though in some sense I have received a blessing. And I just want you to know that. And I think I'm not alone in this space in saying that. So we are blessed to have you not only as part of our conference, but also especially tonight as our presenter, and to have you share about this journey you've been on for some time and the power of monuments, especially as they convey the wonderful gifts of African Americans. So without further ado, will you all join, clapping or whatever as we do in the Zoom space, and welcome Geoffrey, and thanks so much for being with us here.
Well, thank you, Dave, and it's good to be with all of you, many old friends and some new ones. It's good to participate in this, and I thought, as I thought about tonight and the work that you're about, it dawned on me, well, I probably should be a part of this group. I've been about this work for a long time, and so I wanted to talk with you a little bit and to get started before we get to the monuments per se, just to talk about this work of anti-racism, because it is so vital and so important. And it certainly is work that the people of the followers of the way of Jesus, as I like to say, need to be engaged in. So first of all, about my engagement, I think I may have stumbled on this or thought about this in a conversation with Dave at the last board meeting. But when I think about my engagement with anti-racism work, it really goes back to about 1972, while I served on the chaplain staff at Brown University as an intern and later assistant chaplain. And while we were there, again, this was like on the heels of the real, how should I say, the height of the civil rights movement. The talk about racism was really on the surface. People were engaging in this. And interestingly enough, a Jewish student and I cooked up started an organization on campus, and we called it RACE, okay? And RACE was the acronym for the Racial Awareness Communications Exchange. And we started doing discussion groups around campus about race and racism. So when if you do the math, I mean, that's going back a ways. And it's a kind of testament to how old I am. and I'm feeling it. Let me tell you. So, but it also says that that this work has been around for a long time and it's had several different iterations. I have continued to be about this work throughout my career in ministry. That's another thing that I realized. The focus and practical nature, how you do it, what you're doing, so forth and so on, that shifted from place to place and setting to setting. But what I've concluded is that it's always possible to be about this work, no matter what you're doing, okay? No matter what you're calling ministry, even as a retired person, always possible to be about this work. Now, racism is a primary facet of American life, okay? It's integral. It is constitutive of American life. And racism has been in America, with America, a part of America since the beginning, since its colonial days. It has continued into the present. The work of dismantling racism or eradicating racism, as some would say, is also an ongoing process that will not come to fruition. In the short term. And I often kind of quip with myself about this, is that we're talking about a reality that's been around and been working in this society for over 400 years, okay? So let's not get discouraged because we don't eradicate it, we don't dismantle it overnight or in our lifetimes. This is an ongoing process. And while I believe that the goal is achievable, achieving it will require something as massive as the transformation of American society. So that's what we're talking about. But that's okay. Again, we're followers of the way of Jesus. We believe in, pursuing the coming of the kingdom of God on earth, the realm of God on earth. So, the eradication of racism is in our belly. We can do this, okay? So this is something that we're about, but it's a long-term kind of thing. And one of the things I like to say is that when I see people, taking this on seriously, I want to first of all commend you for being about the work, okay? Because it's challenging, and I know it's challenging, and I know you know that it's challenging. And also, I want to encourage you to commit to the long haul, stay with it. I also want to note that there are many ways to approach this work of anti-racism. It's not one thing. This is the work of individuals, organizations, institutions, and movements. I would suggest that it can be done in the family, in the church, the school, the public space, even the workplace and the playground. Anti-racism work can be done wherever we are and whatever configuration we're about. So it need not be confined to any one particular area of life, and it need not be confined to a particular type of practice. Like, for instance, a lot of people, when they think of anti-racism work, they might think of, some kind of consciousness raising, awareness raising workshop. And that stuff is good. I've done many of them. I've gone back for trainings over the years, many times. That's important, but that's not the only way to do it. Anti-racism work can be, educational work. It definitely can be advocacy work out in the streets. It can be preaching, it can be teaching, it can be any number of things. It can be actually, standing up for someone in a tough situation. So I'm saying that this work has many facets and we can be about it, all the time and in many ways. It's important, though, in the work of anti-racism, that practitioners have a firm and accurate understanding of American history. And the presentation tonight about monuments is about what I refer to learning about a tool, okay, that can be used for gaining an understanding of American history. And I say that, I mean, all of you are, people who've been to school, okay, so you know American history. However, there's American history and then there's American history, okay? And to give you an example, the publication by the New York Times of the recent publication of the book 1619, brought on all kinds of hackles and controversy because it lifted up a perspective on American history that the American establishment, let alone the, how should I say, the historically challenged or the ahistorical Americans, which is a large segment of the population, had problems with. But the point that people resisted this because what they understood of as American history was a narrow version that did not encompass the experience of at least one major segment of the population, African Americans, but there's even more that 1619 didn't cover that really is American history. So for tonight's purpose, I'm talking about racism, and again, this is not, anti-African American racism is not the only form of racism. So let's be clear about that. But for this talk, let's think about just getting, clear that American history is African American history. And the African American history is American history. And you really can't separate the two. And you really don't have a full sense of either if you don't have both of those facets. Okay. And that's a very important part of, again, a foundational piece of African American, of anti-racism work. Okay, so I just want to kind of lay that foundation and put that out there. And let me pause and see if anybody wants to comment on that, or question that, or challenge that. It's okay. We can pause and talk. Any thoughts, questions, observations?
Actually, one.
Okay.
There's recently the Pilgrim Press put out a book about the fifth stream on the history of Afro-Christians and bringing them into the whole role. We have an ENR, Congregation of Christians, but we never really brought the Afro-Christianity in the stream, and the effort to do that now. I just picked it up. It showed up in the mail. And what an eye-opener.
Okay. Interesting.
What an eye-opener in terms of history of our denomination.
Yeah, so the Afro-Christians, they've been there since the beginning. And we have, as a denomination, now, I think this is a Synod resolution, as I understand it, coming up. But, are taking steps to officially incorporate that history into our telling of our story. And I think that's an important move. It probably should have happened before, but it's happening now. So this is a good thing. Anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, Geoffrey, thank you so much.
Okay.
It just feels like with the movement of people to suppress history, that this gives us a really concrete call to the church to be telling. We're about telling stories, and so it's a perfect thing for us to be doing. Churches to be talking about our history and poking at exposing where white supremacy is embedded in our practice of Christianity.
Yeah. And I kind of chuckle with all of these efforts at this point. I think you know, how that horse is out the barn, that cat is out the bag, so to speak. You know, people are growing aware, and you know, certain governors keeping certain things out of certain school curriculums is like putting the thumb in the dike. I mean, you know, it's just, it's kind of laughable, but you know, it says something about the virulent racism that is embedded in American society, that there would be an attempt to even suppress that kind of information. You know, it says something. And this reminds me, just want to kind of make a note about something that I mentioned earlier about racism and anti-African American racism. There are other forms, and I would just recommend, there's a book that really is one of the first attempts that I've landed on to kind of really broaden the spectrum of understanding American history from a variety of perspectives in one volume. And that's a book called A Different Mirror by a professor named, I think his name is Ronald or Reginald Takaki. He's deceased now, but I think he was in the University of California system. I have a copy of the book, but it really gives you a perspective on American history from a variety of experiences, including, you know, a couple of Asian American experiences, African American, of course, and Hispanic American. So you know, and that's a good way to broaden the perspective. So I just want to name that and before we go forward.
Geoffrey, pardon me for interrupting, but just thank you so much for what you've named. I been working with Dr. Velda Love in the Sacred Conversations work, and so much of that is, you know, I just feel like I've had a lot of education, as one does, you know, in this work that we do, but such a limited historical perspective, really. I mean, so many stories that just were not part of the regular curriculum of my education. And it's embarrassing at a certain level. You know, I'm angry at another level, because so much of the human story has been left out of the story for so long. You know, yeah.
Well, we're moving forward with, you know, with a broader understanding, and I think that's really a wonderful thing. So let me. I want to move to the topic for tonight, or what we're going to explore, the website and how it came to be. So, how did this whole project start? And let me say, this is a project that sometimes I'm embarrassed to say how long I've been about it, but it's kind of like one of those ideas that comes early in life. Back in, say, in the 1970s is when I really started this, but life happened. Okay, calls to ministry happened, all kinds of things happened, and even though it was my interest in my project, I didn't get around to really working on it until I retired. So and I think others can identify with that and know what that's about. But it's a project that had its start in the mid-1970s. And that's when I discovered my first monument to African Americans. I was in Massachusetts. I was on the Boston Common, and I was just knocking around, looking at things, and I saw this monument, and or it's like a frieze, it's flat. And I looked at it and I said, wow, you know, that's an interesting monument. And I got up close and I looked at it more closely and saw, oh my, they're soldiers, and those soldiers are African Americans. And I was really shocked, because at that point, I have to admit, I had never seen a monument that had anything to do with African Americans. Okay, and so, you know, there I was, and I was really curious about it. And that was a monument to the Massachusetts 54th Regiment, which was the first regiment of African Americans to be recruited, trained, and to fight in the Civil War. And so that was my first discovery. And after that, I began to look for monuments about African Americans as I, over the years, traveled in my work, went to different places. I just started to, you know, look for these monuments and see where they were. And as a, how should I say, a wannabe amateur photographer, take pictures of them. Okay, so and so this project started out in the film days and ended up in the digital days. And and originally, it started out as a project that we thought, oh, this would be an interesting book, a picture book, and ended up being a website, which I think is far more accessible to the general public. So in my calculations, this project has been around somewhere, you know, like 45 years, give or take a couple of years. So how it developed was that over the years, again, I intentionally started to search out and photograph monuments commemorating various aspects of African American history, personages, events, etc., throughout the United States as I went about my work as a UCC minister. And I'm thankful, I should say, I'm thankful to the United Church of Christ for sending me all these different places and giving me some downtime when I could go out and scout out monuments. But it really did happen that way. Again, it was originally envisioned as a book, but the website seems to me far more accessible, and also, how should I say, a lot more cost effective in terms of printing, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the mission and purpose of this website is really in keeping with what we're talking about tonight. The Monumental African American website, that's what it's called, is a portal to learning about African American history and culture by way of monuments honoring specific individuals and groups. That's what it is. That's what its mission is. And again, it begins with the premise that American history is African American history and African American history is American history. The website documents the many ways that race and racism have been a constant throughout American history. So this website covers the span of American history from Africa actually to through enslavement, through the 19th century, Civil War, etc. And it has an arc that goes from then pre-colonial days into the present. And it also, how should I say, is broken down into categories, so that, for instance, there's a major section of monuments to the military, realizing that that African Americans have been engaged in the military exploits for good or evil of the United States from the beginning. Okay, and I think that's an important thing for people to realize, especially some of these so-called patriots running around who want to deny that anybody contributed to this country's well-being other than white supremacists. Okay, so we're very clear about that in terms of looking at the military monuments from that perspective. So what I'm going to do now, and let's pause again, and any observations, questions, sermons? I don't know that anybody wants to offer at this point.
Yeah. In my project that is in West Virginia, we were talking about monuments and what our monument should be and all that to lynching. And I guess I got schooled by the African American artist that like ours would be the first tribute to African Americans, and we need to make it something that the African American community would be proud of. And recommended that, you know, I get the churches involved and yada yada. I just I find it interesting. It's true, but you know how little representation there is, and you know how they're taking possession of this because they don't have representation other places. The African American community don't have you know, representation in other statues across our state. So we're trying to put something on the Capitol grounds that will be hopeful, but be something that African Americans can be proud of. And I guess I never really thought of it that way. I guess it's my own white privilege, but I don't know. I guess what's the role of white Americans in this process?
Well, there are a couple of things and I think when we had the core group conversation, I may have mentioned this. There are a couple of things that I would say that specifically to, you know, about West Virginia in particular. Number one, there is a rich African American history in West Virginia. Okay, let's be clear about that. And it may not be broadly known in West Virginia, but I think that it is known. There is one monument. It's kind of like it's questionable, but there is one monument, the monument to John Henry. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is in West Virginia, and and that's on that if I don't have that on the website, it's going to be there soon. I have the photographs. So I've been down there to see that, but you know, on a broader scale, I think that it's you know, the monument that you're thinking about at the State House might be, you know, good for, you know, first of all, giving some exposure to the inclusion of African Americans in a central place that's very visible, and I'm certainly, you know, supportive of the idea that the African American community should be integrally engaged in providing some leadership for what that ends up looking like.
Yeah.
But one other thing is an interesting thing about West Virginia is that West Virginia and a little town, you know, in West Virginia is the home of Henry Louis Gates. And I mean, if West Virginia doesn't have a historian, I mean, really, you know, I mean, so I'm thinking, you know, there's a lot of opportunity in this work in West Virginia. But the other thing is that, as I recall, if I recall the conversation that we had in the core group conversation, your focus is on a lynching monument, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's a how should I say, that's a challenging kind of thing. You have a whole political, quite frankly, mountain to climb to get people to openly and honestly acknowledge the history of lynching in West Virginia. So that's, and I think that's going to be a part of the long haul with this, to get that to happen. But it's important to happen because that's an important part of the history that people need to come to grips with. Is everybody on the call familiar with the National Memorial for Peace and Justice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you know what the work that they're about, and they want to get these lynching monuments out in every county where lynchings took place. So that's going to be a process that will require a lot of hard work long term.
Yeah, they've put a stop to allowing people to take the actual slabs or whatever you call them with the names on them for a while, because they're doing another process, because that's initially what started this, was seeing those monuments laying there waiting to be taken. And that was my impetus for that project.
Well, and that's but I'm glad you brought that up though, because that's a really good example of some long-term anti-racism work. And I know I've run into people around the country, and my sister-in-law in Maryland is engaged in a process of trying to get one of those slabs in her county. So it's happening, but it's going to be a slow process. But the history of lynching is really important in terms of understanding America thoroughly. Yeah. So any other questions or observations before we move forward with the website itself?
I wanted to say something just in response to what Kate was sharing, just because I heard something else in the question that reminded me of last night. So we had some folks last night in the conversation from Green Book Cleveland, which is a project that the National Park is doing in partnership with several community groups to try to memorialize some of the sites that used to be in the Green Book Cleveland, in the Green Book from Cleveland. And one of the phrases that was used, it wasn't used last night in the presentation, but it was used in the talks leading up to it, was the motto that came from the 1980s from the disability rights movement, which we would term that differently today. But if it's about us but doesn't include us, it's not for us.
Okay.
And so just the question of who are monuments for. And so just in remembering African American history and these monuments, I think certainly in my area here, it's really important to have, as we're putting together new ways of telling those stories, to have the African American community as part of that process.
Yeah.
So that the monuments are not just for white people in white spaces.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I've just wanted to say that just because that was a learning curve for me to make sure that the work that I was doing was including the community around me when we were working to put together memorials and things. So
yeah, and it is. I mean, it's so vital to have the people who own the story tell their own story. I mean, this is for so long. Indigenous people, Native Americans, weren't able to tell their own story, and their story, their version of the story might be very different from popular culture or what so have you, as one glaring example. Okay, I think we're ready to move to exploring the website itself. Or are we? Okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead, Geoffrey.
Okay.
That sounds great.
So I'm going to do a screen share and bring up a PowerPoint. And let's see. I want to get to slideshow.
I think if you keep going across the top there, Geoffrey, where you see insert, then draw.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah.
Here. Okay.
Yep, there you go.
Okay. All right. So this is not the website, but it's a PowerPoint based on the website, and you'll see some of the images that you would normally have in the website. And again, the website is titled the Monumental African American. This is the monument that we talked about in the beginning. This is the first monument. This is the monument to the Massachusetts 54th that I saw in Boston. This might be the original photograph that I took, which was a color slide. So it has that old look. But if you look closely, and I think I may have, yeah, this is what I saw when I said, oh my goodness, those soldiers are African American. Now, again, I know, I know this, I don't need to say this in this presentation, but for a lot of Americans, Africa is a country, okay, and not a continent, okay? But I threw this map up here because I really want people to understand that Africa is a continent with many, many countries, many ethnicities, and African Americans came from mainly, the vast majority were drawn from this area, the Gold Coast area, Nigeria, Ghana, Benin, and so forth and so on. That's where a lot of the enslavement happened, and people were drawn from these areas. Okay, so African American history begins in Africa, and there's a lot to that. This is again one of the monuments, and I think, and I brought this up because it is a relatively new monument. Anybody guess where this monument might be? No? This is the state capital of South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina. Not a place that you would necessarily think there would be a monument to all of African American history, but there is. And again, the conversation that went on around this was that, you know, South Carolina had its monument on its Capitol grounds to the Confederacy. Its state flag was used parts of the Confederate battle flag, and they were, how should I say, they had to make changes, okay? And so one of the changes that they made was to develop a monument to all of African American history as a way to kind of balance things, although I think the pressure is still on to remove the monument to the Confederacy, okay? But this is, again, a monument that depicts various aspects of African American history, and especially enslavement. So, and this is one of the few monuments that I found that really try to capture that aspect of African American history vividly in its portraiture. I talked about the military legacy and from the 1770 through the centuries since. That's a part of the website. And here are a couple samples of some things that you'll find on the website in the military legacy section. Again, this is the Boston Massacre Monument on the Boston Common. And if you notice at the very top, the first name you see is Crispus Attucks. Okay, now some would say that Crispus Attucks was the first person to give his life in the American Revolution. And again, there's some significance to that. Another monument is the Civil War Monument in Washington, D.C. And there's more to this on the website. But this is, again, a very important monument in Washington that gives you a very full picture of the various ways that African Americans participated in the Union Army and Navy of the Civil War. Now, this one is a monument in Philadelphia, PA. This is the Colored Soldiers and Sailors Monument. This is a First World War era monument. And this is one that, you know, with the conversation that we were having earlier about who is telling the story. This one is often questioned. People ask me who commissioned this monument, who built it, what was their thinking. And this was more of a monument that was not necessarily proposed. It might have been proposed, but it was not constructed or designed by African American people. And the characters don't necessarily have features that would kind of portray African American people vividly. But it was a monument, and it is a monument in Philadelphia that commemorates African American participation in World War I, soldiers and sailors. And it's very prominently displayed in Philadelphia on Benjamin Franklin Parkway, which is the major memorial parkway in the city. Another monument that's military in nature is the Vietnam era Vietnam Memorial Monument in Washington. And this one is, to me, is very interesting because by this time, by the time the Vietnam monument was built, consciousness had shifted, and the depiction of African American people in the monuments was very clear. Now, this monument, you may remember the controversy about this monument because it was, in the beginning, it was only the names and the wall. And remember, those of you who were around then, when the design first came out, there was just the hackles raised by veterans primarily because they wanted to see a human image in the monument. So, and then the question became, well, there were women in Vietnam serving in the war. Where are the women? So you begin to have images of people, men and women, and African Americans were included. So this is another example of that's a part of the Vietnam era memorial. I'm going to pause here and see if anybody has any comments or thoughts about this.
This monument here, where are we? Where geographically?
Oh, Washington, D.C. This is a part of the Vietnam Memorial, Vietnam War Memorial. And you might not see it if you don't kind of walk around the entire memorial, because the wall is where people go from. But if you step off on the side, you'll see these two monuments, one of women and one of these soldiers.
Geoffrey,
Yeah.
it's Edie. You may get to this at some point, but you know, it's surprising, not so much with this Vietnam Memorial, but some of the other ones in some of the states or some of the older ones, it's surprising that they exist at all. And I'm sure that many of these memorials have a whole story connected with them of how they came to be,
Yeah.
you know, and who paid for them and who made it happen. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you have any kind of general remarks about any of that, or whatever. I'll just.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. As we get to some of them, that's a very interesting observation, Edie, and I'm not sure I always have an answer on that, but sometimes I do. Another section of the website is the freedom fighters, basically, the advocates for justice and equality. And of course, there are numerous now. When this photograph was shot, this was one of the few monuments to Harriet Tubman, but there are several now. This one you'll find in Boston, Massachusetts. And this one, now, does anybody recognize this one?
I don't recognize it, but I'm intrigued.
It's in
by it.
Oberlin. It's in Oberlin. I go by it almost every day.
Okay. I was hoping you'd speak up, Dave.
I was trying to get my microphone on. It wasn't cooperating.
Okay, so this is the Underground Railroad monument in Oberlin, Ohio, which I love it. Every time I go out there, I have to go by it. But Oberlin being, and there's some congregational UCC history in this. Oberlin was definitely a transport point for people escaping enslavement and going to Canada. And there's a lot of history out there about that. But this, I just think this monument just says it all. Now, this is a monument, and this monument is only, I want to say, no more than 3 years old. It's in Philadelphia, and it was erected by the city of Philadelphia with a lot of input from the African American community. This is Octavius V. Cato. Now, you may not have heard of Octavius V. Cato. He was a Philadelphian. He was a very prominent 19th century Philadelphian. And I like to cite this monument because of not only who he was, but also how he died and why he died. Octavius Cato was murdered on Election Day, October 10th, 1871 in Philadelphia. And he was attempting to vote. Okay, so the struggle for voting rights is integral to anti-racism work, and it has always been. What happened with Octavius Cato was that he, after the ratification of the 15th Amendment guaranteeing all Americans the right to vote, he attempted to vote in the election in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And he, along with several other African Americans, were murdered that day. He was just shot down in the street, okay? So voting rights, again, have been challenged and in contention since the beginning. Okay, and this monument is very prominently. It's the first monument in Philadelphia that, how should I say, is at City Hall. That's the other thing. This monument is right outside of City Hall, prominently displayed. And it's the first one that really acknowledges the presence of the African American community, which is one of the oldest African American communities, or communities of free African Americans in the country. This is a monument that I always like to tell a story about this monument, but anybody want to guess who this handsome gentleman is? Okay, this is a monument found in Boston, Massachusetts. And again, the monuments cover a number of topics. So the last one with Cato was voting rights. Now we're talking about labor, okay, and labor organizing. This monument is the monument to A. Philip Randolph, the founder of the International Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. Civil rights activist, one of the organizers of the March on Washington, and a very, very prominent leader in the civil rights movement. Now, and this monument is found in the Back Bay Station, Boston, Massachusetts. And the reason it's there is it has to do with railroads, okay? Now, there are two monuments to A. Philip Randolph. One is in Boston, Back Bay Station, this one, and the other one is in Washington, in Union Station. So you'll find that, and that, so that all that history around labor organizing and civil rights is encapsulated in this monument, or these two monuments. But A. Philip Randolph, I'd like to tell a story about this monument because it kind of typifies why these monuments are important in one way or another. In that one time when I took this photograph, I was just hanging around Back Bay Station, watching the monument, waiting for the light to be right, and so forth and so on. And a man and his little boy came up, and this is this monument is very, very impressive. It's large, it's grand, and the little boy was just awestruck. This was a Hispanic father and son, and I was just watching them, listening to them. The little boy would say, he said, "Oh, Daddy, who is that man? Who's that? That's a really, that's really something." And the father said, "I don't know who he is. I don't know who he is, but he must have been a great man." So, I couldn't resist at that point. I had to, I had to go and befriend them and tell them the story of A. Philip Randolph. And they were really interested to know it, and so forth and so on. But I think that, that again, this was an opportunity to share a little bit of American history with what probably was a new immigrant family, and wanted to know. They wanted to know what this was about. So that's the monument to A. Philip Randolph. And again, he could show up in several sections of the website, and I might have him eventually in at least two.
And Geoffrey, I'm noticing how each of these monuments has, it brings a three-dimensionality to that's so evocative. It's like the presence of that person is somehow in that space, right? In a different way than when you see a picture or something that and it's very powerful. You talk about this. That's not a story I knew. I'm going to have to look at A. Philip Randolph. I'm just thinking of these, the monuments themselves, by their dimensionality,
Mhm.
bring something for me that's powerful, and yeah, just the
Yeah.
power of the art form, I guess, is where I'm headed with that.
Yeah, and let me say one of the things that I should mention about the website is every monument that is pictured on the website, there's a button you can push, and it'll take you to all the background information that you would need about the monument, about the person, about the the history. So that's how we got the history there. Now I know. Uh, I would be another 20 years working on this if it were not for Wikipedia. Okay, so I did use the links to other websites to get the background information instead of trying to write all of it myself. I mean, I'm no professional historian, and that's what it would have taken. Here's another monument that is in Birmingham, Alabama. Okay, this is a monument to the children who were involved in the civil rights movement. You may, if you've seen movies like Eyes on the Prize and so forth and so on, the children were out there marching, and young people in general were the foot soldiers of the civil rights movement in many instances, and certainly in Birmingham, Alabama. So this monument depicts their presence, and where this monument is situated is right across the street. Actually, this park is across the street from the Baptist church that was bombed. Was it 16th Street Baptist Church? So if you're ever looking for this monument and you're in Birmingham, it's in the park that's right across the street.
Geoffrey, we had a question from Ty.
Okay.
Ivy. Yeah, we had a question from Ivy.
No, I was just going to ask if this was across the street from the 16th Street Baptist Church, because I've sat in that park next to the statues of the 4 girls.
Okay.
And
yes.
it was really powerful just to sit among them.
Mm-hmm.
On this bright day, looking at the church where they died. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah. That we took the pilgrimage to Birmingham this past summer.
Right. Yes.
And the most emotional experience was the lynching memorial. But the one that sticks with me that I can't get out of my head is the juxtaposition of sitting on the bench with the 4 girls and then walking through the park with the dogs. And Dave was talking about the 3D real life feeling. Walking through that park was terrifying. I mean, it's just amazing to see. But they did this to kids, So anyway, I just excited because this is exactly the thing that was the most important for me on our trip. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the value of these experiences and these monuments again is they tell stories and they bring these things to life. Now I'm curious, did you see this monument when you were there?
So I don't know if I don't know if Dave saw it, but I am mobility challenged, so I could only get as far as the statue of Dr. King before my body gave out. So I didn't get to see this particular statue. Someone else may have, though.
I saw it.
You said, okay. Yeah, so this is one. See, and I did this photograph before the one you saw with the girls on the bench and the King statue were there. This is relatively old. I want to say it's at least about maybe 10, 15 years ago that I took this photograph. So I'm planning to get back down there because I haven't been to the Peace and Justice Memorial yet myself, and I want to get some more of the photographs of these monuments. Okay, here's another one that you might recognize from the face. This is a monument, again, Oberlin, Ohio.
Yep.
Okay, and as you can imagine, there are multiple monuments to Martin Luther King Jr. around the country. And we have several on the website. This is one of the earlier ones that I saw that I just thought was very unique, the way it's done with brickwork. And this is again Ohio, Oberlin, Ohio, and this is another monument to Martin Luther King Jr. Now, all monuments are not representational, and this one is very, very different. You would have to be there. I'll point out, this is the only place where you get a sense of it being a Martin Luther King monument, but it has dates on it, like the day he was assassinated, and other pieces of information that will tell you something about Martin Luther King Jr. But this is at a high school in New York City. Okay, and we'll move on. This is one of my favorites. This is the monument to Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Everybody familiar with him? It's been a while since. Adam Powell was a United States congressman from Harlem for at least 25, maybe 30 years. And Adam Powell was probably for many years, for decades, he was the sole voice for a civil rights bill in Congress. For years, he was the pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. He succeeded his father as pastor, and he was how should I say? He was famous around the country for being an advocate and an agitator and outspoken. He was also very controversial because. I'll give you one example. Adam Powell saw what white congressmen were doing, going on boondoggles, all kinds of trips and so forth and so on. And he would do it. He would do the same thing very openly. And when they would challenge him, he would expose everybody for what everybody was doing. So he was despised by many, loved by many, but he's a very controversial figure. The thing that I always note about Adam Powell, and he has an incredible history, was that he was elected to Congress in, I think, 1943. He introduced the Civil Rights Bill every year until 1968, I think, something like that. So essentially, his example of persistence in the struggle was something that really stood out. He was a very, very, again, he was a powerful preacher, teacher, advocate, and somewhat of a ladies' man, I will say. That was a part of the controversy. But he was a civil rights advocate, and he really was loved in Harlem, in his district. Matter of fact, he was the backstory. One of the backstories about him was that he could only, for a long period of time, he could only go to Harlem on Sundays. Okay, because he had slandered, well, they said he slandered this woman who was, he called her a bag woman for some numbers runners in Harlem. And they had an arrest warrant out for him, but they couldn't serve the arrest warrant they couldn't serve him with this citation on Sundays. So that was so he would be in Harlem on Sundays, and any of the rest of the time of the week he would not be there. It's an interesting story. You may want to look it up. But anyway, this monument is in Harlem, off of 125th Street at the State Office Building, the Adam Powell State Office Building. Then we have educators. This is a section of the website. Benjamin Mays, the former president of Morehouse College, was the mentor to Martin Luther King Jr., very prominent African-American educator. Maggie Lena Walker. This woman, this monument is in Richmond, Virginia. Maggie Lena Walker was a civil rights activist, a women's rights activist. She was the first woman, now think about this, she was the first woman owner and president of a bank in America. Not the first African-American woman, the first woman bank owner and president in America. She was also a very, very active civil rights activist in the Richmond area, and just very highly respected, high school named after her, et cetera. But she was a part of the movement of uplift of African-American people as African-American communities developed in the post-slavery era. And of course, this gentleman, George Washington Carver, this is one of the people that generally people know about, the Peanut Man, okay? Kids learn about him in elementary school and so forth and so on. But this monument is found at the Botanical Gardens in St. Louis, Missouri, the Missouri Botanical Gardens. A beautiful monument and tribute to George Washington Carver, who was a scientist and educator. Mary McLeod Bethune. This is Washington, D.C. Mary McLeod Bethune was an educator, was very close to the Roosevelts, was on President Roosevelt's kitchen cabinet, a staunch advocate for civil rights, and the founder of the, what was it called? It's a women's organization, the Historic African-American Women's, the National Council of Negro Women. She was a very prominent figure in American life up until her death in 1955. And this is one of the monuments that also includes children in the monument. There are several that include children with the adult figure. And of course, there's arts and entertainment. Now here's one, many of you may be familiar with Nina Simone, I hope you are. Nina Simone, singer, pianist, has a fascinating story, but this monument is found in a little town up in the mountains of western North Carolina, Tryon, North Carolina. And they have developed a whole little plaza about Nina Simone, and the monument to her is there. Nina Simone was one of the leading voices of the civil rights movement in terms of her artistry. Many of you may be familiar with her famous composition, Mississippi GD. If you haven't heard it, you should look it up on iTunes or something like that. Charlie Parker. This is a monument that you'll find in Kansas City. I think it's Kansas City, Kansas. And Charlie Parker was a jazz alto saxophone player who revolutionized jazz. He was one of the creators of what we call bebop in jazz. He and Dizzy Gillespie. He is from Kansas City, and Kansas City, is very proud of being the home of Charlie Parker. But this is, again, a monument that is positioned in such a way that if you see this monument, you see all of Kansas City, the skyline and everything in back of it. I tried to get that in the photograph. And then there are sports icons. That's another section of the website. So this is a monument to Jesse Owens. Anybody seen it before? Now, this I love showing this monument in Ohio because this is people have probably seen this monument and didn't recognize it, but this monument is at the Horseshoe in Columbus, Ohio, at Ohio State. It's right there. If you go to an Ohio State football game, you will see it.
I wondered, Geoffrey, I wondered about that. Okay, I'm gonna have to go down and look for it now. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. It's this is a monument that you can walk inside actually. And it tells a lot about Jesse Owens, but it's a who was an Ohio State track star, and an American hero, so to speak. So this is again one of the sports ones, and this is another one.
What's inside that monument, Geoffrey?
There are photographs and written plaques about the life of Jesse Owens. Yeah. There's another Jesse Owens monument here in Cleveland too, which people it's right beside City Hall. If you okay, in Cleveland, and this is Althea Gibson, tennis star. Again, outstanding American athlete. I think she was the first African American woman to win at Wimbledon and the U.S. Open. But she, this monument, which is really lifelike and wonderful monument, is in Newark, New Jersey. So this gives you this sampling gives you a sense of the breadth of what's on the website. That's again a sampling of all this there. But in each instance, you can get the background. It's the monument, yeah, the visual of the monument, but the history that is in about the monument, about the person or the issue itself, the historic factor is all there. So it's a way of exploring. You can kind of, just kind of spend some time, or if you're interested in one particular monument, it's a way of exploring what it's about, what its era was about, other factors that were going on. There are all kinds of links to other information about the topic. It's all there. So that's what we try to do. And it's, again, I see it as a tool, okay, among the many tools that you can have in your bailiwick to be about the work of anti-racism and sharing it with others. I think it's a great way to share with younger people, for instance, any kind of teaching that you do. You could probably use this in Sunday school. I don't know. Do we still have Sunday school day?
Well, it depends on the setting. Geoffrey, one of the things I asked you about, and I would really like to pursue, and I think it would be a wonderful educational opportunity to every month in our e-news lift up one of these monuments.
Yeah.
And just over time, sprinkle our regular communications with an education about someone we might otherwise not have had the opportunity to learn about. Oh, Ruth, thanks for that question. Geoffrey, do you mind putting the link to the website into the chat for us?
Okay, I'll do that. And then, and Ruth, can you reiterate that question again? I want to come back to it.
Which one? About the link to the website, or?
No, you said something earlier that I wanted to come back to.
I asked about the inside of the Jesse Owens Monument. At the beginning of our conversation, I was talking about churches needing to tell the stories of the history.
Okay.
There might have been something in between and I don't remember.
Okay. But since we're at a pause, is there anything, any other questions or observations you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Tim Walters. I was a little late coming in. Do you have literature or something that you could, to this website that you could put out in different places and gatherings and groups, or, just give to people?
Yeah, I do have a brochure, which I can also send. Yeah, maybe I can send to Dave or to Michael, and you can and we can circulate that. Okay, that probably would be useful. So yes, we can do that. And the link to the website. Let me go get that for you.
Yeah, it's in the chat already. Will
Okay.
Jones put it in there for us? Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Good. So yeah, a brochure we have, and I do this. I've done. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be doing similar presentation on Sunday at a church in Florida. But as the momentum grows, I'll be doing more presentations about this and various aspects of it. I really wanted to zero in on the work that you're doing, because I think this is an important asset to anti-racism work. But certainly I'll be doing presentations about this in other ways and adding to it, actually. And if you stumble on one of the things that the website does, is that it encourages participation. So if you're out there in your travels and you see something, that is a monument about African American history, snap a picture of it and send it, and you will be credited as a photographer. So, and I've gotten some friends and relatives involved that way. One of the things that, and I'll mention this to you, that one of the ways I'm looking toward expanding this work is finding some people who are interested in doing presentations like this about the website and the history, and developing a cadre of people who might just kind of take this and run with it. So anyway, just a thought.
And Geoffrey, Ivy's hands are up.
Okay.
Just one.
Just one. Ivy's hand is up. Yeah.
I wanted to just make an observation that this has been moving and educational, but it seems like it's been fun for you too.
Yeah, well, it has been. When you work on something like this and kind of develop it for years, and I am a photographer, so I enjoy doing the photography. So yeah, it has been fun for me, and I really love history. I mean, I'm a kind of a history buff, not a historian, but a history buff. So yeah, I do enjoy it. Yeah.
So do you have your family involved? I saw a lot of people with the last name of Black that were holding up cameras.
Yes, I do have my family involved, my daughter, my cousin, my brother.
Okay, good.
You know how we are. We all do the same thing. We put our families to work, Yep.
And one more thing. I don't know. I know that you have a plan at some point to get back to Birmingham, but in Montgomery, there is a statue of Annika, Lucy, and Betsy, who were patients of J. Marion Sims, who had a great reputation as the father of gynecology. And what he had done was he had done experiments on these 3 slave women and without anesthesia to make discoveries about how to deal with fistulas during pregnancy. And he had a statue in Central Park, I think it was, somewhere in New York City that they removed in the last couple of years. Well, the people that he worked on, they created statues for them, and they're in Montgomery, Alabama. So if you ever get that way, it is a wonderful statue to see. Again, another moving one, and it's in color.
Wow.
Yes.
I included a link there in the chat to the monument. And when we went and did the tour, Geoffrey, when we did the pilgrimage back this summer, Michelle Browder, who actually put the Mothers of Gynecology Museum together, she was our tour guide for a day. And she's very animated. She's very good at telling stories, but the
Y'all ain't ready.
to stand in the space where all the art has been done, and then to look up at, it's very moving. It's very powerful. Yeah.
Well,
and the building where the surgeries were done, where all of the work was done, she's turning that into a museum, I think. But it's telling the story too. She's got a really fascinating story about how she took ownership of the building. But it's Michelle Browder is a fantastic artist and leader. But that monument's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, thank you for we're all learning something. I do plan to. Oh wow!
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Oh wow, whose photograph is that?
I don't know.
That's from the website, I think. It may be Michelle's.
Yeah. No, actually, I took that when we were down
you took
on
that
our
one?
pilgrimage. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. That's beautiful.
So Michael, you can send it to me. And we can
Dave, you can send that.
Yeah, okay.
Contribute. This is good. See, we're getting somewhere. So let me, I do plan. I'm planning to do a trip. Actually, this fall, I'm hoping to get down there and do a swing through Birmingham and Montgomery, and over to Jackson, Mississippi. I happen to be a trustee at Tougaloo College, and so we have a board meeting in the fall, and I'm really kind of planning to make a swing through the Deep South and do some photographs then. But that's my plan. But you all have helped me already. I mean, that's one I'll have and do the background on and get it up there. That'll be great. Thank you so much. Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, I'll send that on over to you, Geoffrey. That'd be glad to.
So not to create more work for your website, but I'm wondering if there are any plans to have like a map that shows where all these are located, so that people that are planning trips could go to the website and say, oh, here's a whole bunch of these monuments that I could incorporate into my trip, or might even plan a trip around visiting monuments.
Well, we don't have that yet, but and it's not more. I mean, it's not work that we don't want. I mean, it's something that we would love to have on, because, and I've thought about it as a travel resource as well. So it's just a matter of finding a way to get that done well. So I may have to, again, defer to somebody who's really a web maker to get it done well. But we can do that. Yeah. Great idea. Great suggestion. Well, if you have any thoughts, afterthoughts, suggestions, ideas, when you do if you look at the site, you can always, send me messages or whatsoever have you. I open the site by saying this is a collaborative effort, and we welcome contributions. So, like the one we just got. So thank you for that, and I hope you keep thinking about it. And again, feel free to use the website in your work, and keep it moving. And I will be, again, growing it as we find more monuments, because they're being created, and sometimes it's a matter of discovery. People are pointing things out to me that I didn't know about, and that's very helpful.
Well, Geoffrey, thank you so much. I mean, this is such a rich resource and journey, and thanks for not only sharing where you've been, but inviting us into it. You know, I think this is part of, David, I love your question, because it makes me want to seek these spaces out and experience them, you know, in kind of the real time of being able to walk around them and see them that in their fullness, you know, in a really such a powerful way. And then the gift of the links to the history and the stories behind these monuments is such a wonderful and important gift for all of us. And that expansion of, you know, you started out by reminding us of the necessity of expanding and deepening our sense of the fullness of history, as we understand the world in which we live. I just want to say, maybe if we could all do some expression of appreciation here in our Zoom space, to say thank you, really,
My
for
pleasure.
this.
It's really been my pleasure.
For this gift. And Kay, you had mentioned something of the work that you're working on in terms of the honoring those who were lynched in West Virginia. I don't know if you want to say anything else about that and the partnerships that you're involved in there. That's an important another dimension of how monuments are lifting up important, often hidden pieces of history.
Yeah, it spurred from our pilgrimage to the South this past summer, and I have a group that have gathered we're starting with reconciliation services, and then growing to a monument on the Capitol grounds for lynching. We found with the ones at EJI, we found another bunch. So there's like 47 or something like that. So we're exploring just what happened to those 47 people. It's a process. The deeper I go, the more I don't know. So, but it's a fun process.
Yeah, well, certainly a powerfully deepening one, and I know you've got good partners. I met at least one of those folks in our recent West Virginia Council meetings, who's a good partner with you there. Tim.
Yeah, just picking up on this. This is incredible for me. You know, I have, my kids some of my kids are African American, some of my grandchildren are African American, and having a source where they can go to, because that's the thing, that is the way. It's hard to travel to all the different places and see the different places, but putting it out, everything in one place where it's kind of self-contained. But I'm also wondering, with the website, and I may have missed it at some point, is there a component that takes you back to where you might want to go if you want to get more education, find out more about the different people? You see the picture, you get a slice of their life, and if books or websites about them, articles about them.
Yeah, those buttons on each, there should be a button that says read more or something like that. Okay. on each monument. And that will take you, that's a link that will take you to a website or a Wikipedia page or something that will give you a vast array of information. And if it's Wikipedia, it will take you to many, many more links that provide you with background information. So just look for those read more buttons on the monument. And the other thing I'll add is that in some instances, you'll even find videos of various people. So there's some interactive stuff in those background pieces.
Because I see the website is sort of a starting point to explore more about history in general, about African Americans, what they've done, and get you started. Because I know my grandkids, especially when they talk about different things coming out of school, their awareness of things is so limited. Is that finding a starting point is a challenge, and if we can refer them to a point where they start this exploration, then they can take it further. But you've got to have that initial point in which you begin your explorations about what's going on. And some of the things we're putting on there tonight can seem minor in nature, but then when you consider their overall position and what they achieved, is that it helps to find out more about them and see the breadth of information and the breadth of impact that African Americans have had on our history.
Yeah, and one thing, not to prolong this, but one idea that you just reminded me of is, listen to what the kids are already studying in school.
Yeah.
If they're studying about George Washington, I mean, or something as simple as that, whatever they're studying, you can probably find something that will touch them. So you can expand what they're doing. If they're interested in sports, you can find something that will link to their interests.
Thank you.
Geoffrey, what is the, is there an email address to you? I have a picture that I'd like to send you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My email, there's one for the website, but let me give you mine directly, which is JAZZY GEEBE @gmail.
Okay.
I think I just put that in the chat if it's right.
Okay, good. And Michael, if you could fire me the links and the photograph for tonight, I'd appreciate that.
Yep, I will make sure to send it. And if you send the brochure to Dave or myself, we'll make sure to get that out to everybody too.
Okay,
Absolutely.
good.
Absolutely.
Good.
Well, friends, it's been just a rich evening to be together. And Geoffrey, thank you so much. I'm wondering if I could prevail on you for one more thing, and that would be to offer us a prayer to close out the evening. And we are going to be getting more information out. We had a bit of a break. We had the anti-racism or the Sacred Ally Quilt Ministry. So it's been a while since we've been together in the same space. I did want to alert you all to the fact that there is a denomination-wide read of How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi that's being initiated. And I'm thinking Michael and Kay and in our core team, and Geoffrey, I might follow you up on that musing that you had about if you'd be willing to maybe partner with us. But I think it might be a rich thing to offer a book study as we move towards Synod, and so we can talk about the details. One of the things we are aware of, I think, is how we build relationships over the long haul and fostering spaces more than just our quarterly gatherings that might be able to help facilitate that. And I know folks are in a lot of different book studies, but one of the rich gifts of this network is to be in space with each other that we might not otherwise normally have a chance to be in conversation with. And that's also, I think, a really rich and wonderful engagement. So we don't have a formal plan yet, but I wanted to name that from the Join the Movement for Racial Justice. That's that's an encouragement, and I just wanted to plant the seed of that idea that I've learned of recently, and maybe you have too. So, Geoffrey, would you be willing to pray us out this evening as we bring our time to a close?
My pleasure.
Thanks.
If you would join me in prayer. Loving Creator, you who are the giver of all things, the maker of all things, the creator of all that is and all your people, in their many languages, in their many hues, in their many ways of being in the world. Thank you for loving us all. Grant us the openness of heart and mind to love as you love, to care as you care, and to be advocates for the justice that you seek. Be with us, O God, as we engage in ministries of hope and of love and of transformation, that we might be always working towards creating with you the world that you envision, one where all of your people and all of your creatures live in harmony and peace. Bless us now as we conclude our time together, that our minds might be enriched with thoughts that will glorify and serve you as we move among your people and on your earth. For this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Thank you. Thank you all so much, and Geoffrey
Thank you.
especially. Thank you to you.